As a challenge, I decided to attempt to interpret a satisfying ending to The Game of Bear, M.R.James's lost fragment, with its hints and the logic of my presented completion. Few pieces in the Jamesian canon are as tantalising as the 7-page torso entitled The Game of Bear. First seen only after M.R.J's death, on loose foolscap among his Cambridge papers, it reached print in 1999 in the small press miscellany The Fenstanton Witch and Others. What survives is vintage James, 2 aging dons in a country house library, children shrieking at a parlour game that sounds altogether too feral, and beyond the windows a great house sullen with secrets. Yet the manuscript breaks off just as Mr. A begins reading from Henry Perdue's increasingly agitated diary. No spectral manifestation appears, no fatal climax is recorded. James simply stopped. Readers, therefore, are left with the irresistible but frustrating question, what happened to Henry Purdue, and what exactly is the bear? The completion that follows is an imaginative reconstruction offered for pleasure and critical discussion. It does not pretend to be anything more than an informed pastiche. That said, James's fragment provides a surprising number of signposts toward an ending. To assist the listener from where the suggested ending continues, I have added a brief musical preamble. The Game of Bear by M.R.James with a suggested ending written and read by Christopher Halton. 2 elderly persons sat reading and smoking in the library of a country house after tea on an afternoon in the Christmas holidays, and outside a number of the children of the house were playing about. They had turned out all the lights and were engaged in the dreadful game of bear, which entails stealthy creepings up and down staircases and along passages, and being leapt upon from doorways with loud and hideous cries. Such a cry and an answering scream of great poignancy were heard just outside the library door. One of the 2 readers, an uncle of the young things who were disporting themselves there, leapt from his chair and dashed the door open. "I will not have you doing that," he shouted, and his voice was vibrant with real anger. "Do you hear? Stop it at once. I can't stand it. Why can't you find something else? What?" "Well, I don't care. I can't put up with it. Yes, very well. Go and do it somewhere where I can't hear it." He subsided into a growl and came back to his chair. But his friend saw that his nerves were really on edge and ventured something sympathetic. "It's all very well," said the uncle, "but I cannot bear that jumping out and screaming. Stupid of me to fly out like that, but I couldn't help it. It reminded me of all that business, you know." "Well," said the friend after a short pause, "I'm really not sure that I do." "Oh," he added in a more concerned tone, "unless you mean Purdue." "That's it," said the uncle. There was another silence, and then the friend said, "Really, I'm not sorry that happened just now, for I never did hear the rights of the Purdue business. Will you tell me exactly what happened?" "I don't know," said the uncle. "I really don't know if I ought, but I think I will. Not just now, though. I'll tell you what. If it's fine tomorrow, we'll take a walk in the morning, and tonight I'll think over the whole affair and get it straight in my mind. I have often felt somebody besides me ought to know about it, and all his people are out of the way now." The next day was fine, and the 2 men walked out to a hill at no real distance, which was known as Windmill Hill. The mill that had topped it was gone, but a bit of the brick foundation remained, and afforded a seat from which a good stretch of pleasant wild country could be seen. Here then Mr. A and Mr. B sat down on the short, dry grass, with their backs against the warm brick wall, and Mr. A produced a little bundle of folded paper and a pocket-book which he held up before Mr. B as an indication that he was prepared not only to tell the story to which he stood pledged, but to back it with documentary evidence. "I brought you here," he said, "partly because you can see Perdue's place. There." He pointed with his stick to a wooded slope which might be 3 or 4 miles off. In the wood was a large clearing, and in the clearing stood a mansion of yellow stone with a portico, upon which, as it chanced, the sun was shining very brilliantly, so that the house stood out brightly against the background of dark trees. "Where shall I begin?" said Mr. A. Why, said Mr. B, I'll tell you exactly how little I know, and then you can judge. You and Purdue, you remember, were senior to me at school and at Cambridge. He went down after his 3 years. You stayed up for part of a fourth, and then I began to see more of you. Before that, I was more with people of my own year, and beyond a fair number of meetings with Purdue at breakfast and lunch and so on, I never saw much of him, not nearly as much as I should have liked, in fact. Then I remember your going to stay with him, there, I suppose, pointing with his stick, in the Easter vac, and well, that was the last of it. Just so, said Mr. A. I didn't come up again, and you and I practically didn't meet till a year or two back, did we? Very well then, there it is. I was never inclined to write the story down in a letter, and the long and short of it is that you have never heard it, but you do know what sort of man Purdue was, and how fond I was of him. When I stayed with him over there, the place was his only home, and yet it wasn't his. He was an orphan and practically adopted by his uncle and aunt, who were quite old childless people. There had been another uncle who had married a village woman and had one daughter. Mr. A. recounts the disquieting presence of Caroline Purdue, the embittered cousin, and Henry Perdue's attempts to distance himself from her. How is the rest of this to be told? I have here some papers which bear on it, but they are fragmentary, of course. When Henry Purdue was alone in that big house, he did what at other times was rather foreign to his habits, confided his feelings to paper. Here are some entries. Letter from C.P. Caroline Purdue, of course. Infernal woman. May she come see me and talk over this painful matter? No, she mayn't. Mr. A. folded the slip and glanced across the sun-warmed turf to the distant house that glinted between the pines. That was written on the 28th of March, he resumed. On the 1st of April there is a longer entry. I won't read every line, there are personal touches that concern no one now. But you must hear the substance. Have at last inspected the lumber room at the north end of the long passage. Found nothing save the same confounded old oak chest that has stood there from time out of mind, lid swollen fast. C.P. no doubt knows what is inside, being, as she says, the only Purdue left who was not preferred. Dreamt last night, or so I thought, woke at 3 to a pattering, like a child's bare feet, crossing the upper corridor. Could see light through keyhole, though I'd blown the candle out. Must summon courage to look. 2 nights later, said Mr. A., this. 2 a.m., roused by the same soft running. Then silence, followed by a loud cry, might be bear or there. Cannot trust myself, dare not ring for Wilson, he is nervous. I pass over a week of jangled notes, clocks stopping, doors found unlatched, and so on. Henry's writing deteriorates, the lines slope like a ploughed field on a hillside. Finally, on the 15th, see here, produced the key of the oak chest. How had she got it? Objected when I wished to open it in her presence. Said it must be done after dusk, quoting some piece of dog Latin about ursum exciter. Caroline left that evening. Henry waited until full dark. His valet Wilson heard him go, and carried the chest into the chapel wing. Wilson, who had the toothache, swears he neither slept nor touched a drop. Yet when he ventured to his master's room at 8 next morning, Henry was gone. The search took them to the chapel. They found the chest overturned before the altar rails and split by violence. Of its contents, only one fragment was ever mentioned in my hearing. An oddly carved wooden mask, snout-like, studded round the rim with nails. And Henry? He was at last discovered in the narrow stair that burrows down from the organ loft to the crypt, face uppermost, fingers buried in the plush of the runner, as though dragged backwards. A faint rope burn crossed his throat, but rope there was none. Wilson left within the week. Caroline never returned, and the place has stood tenanted by caretakers only. But I have not told you the worst. 6 months later I walked over, as I foolishly thought, to pay my respects. The caretaker's 2 boys, bold urchins, fond of a romp, asked if I would play a game they had learned. We hide, sir, and you creeps along and shouts bear, and so on. Where did you pick that up? Said I. Up in the long passage, they told me, behind the oak box what split. That, finished Mr. A., was the moment I decided the business must never again be called to mind until your nieces and nephews began screaming outside my door yesterday." He thrust the bundle of papers deeper into the pocketbook, snapped the elastic over it, and gazed across the heather. Mr. B, after some time, ventured a question. "And the mask?" "Burned, I was told, though a joiner who helped swore that when the blaze caught the wood, something inside cracked like bone. Well, shall we move on?" The two men rose, stamping circulation into legs grown stiff. As they turned down the slope, Mr. B risked one last inquiry. "Do you suppose," he asked, "that Purdue himself started the children's game?" Mr. A looked back at the distant house, now paling as a cloud passed over the sun. "I think," he said slowly, "that the game was older than any of us, and Henry merely gave it leave to resume." The end.